Okay, let's go ahead and move on here to the update on Washington. You might have thought that some of the discourse had cooled, and I had hoped that that's where it would stay. But unfortunately, we are seeing complete insanity at the institutional level. Senator Chris Coons and his comments, which we're about to play for you, where he calls for troops in Ukraine, matter because not only is he from Delaware, he is known as the Biden whisperer in the Senate. He is seen as a projection of the President of the United States himself and much of his thinking within the body. So when he says something like this, you should really pay attention. This was over the weekend. Let's take a listen.
I think President Biden's leadership has been steady and constructive, but this is a critical moment. If Vladimir Putin, who has shown us how brutal he can be, is allowed to just continue to massacre civilians, to commit war crimes throughout Ukraine, without NATO, without the West coming more forcefully to his aid, I deeply worry that what's going to happen next is that we will see Ukraine turn into Syria. The American people cannot turn away from this tragedy in Ukraine. I think the history of the 21st century turns on how fiercely we defend freedom in Ukraine, and that Putin will only stop when we stop him.
I mean,
Putin will only stop when we stop him.
Only stop when we stop him. Says that we should consider troops there. And look, if you think that he's not doubling down after the outrage of those comments, he absolutely is. Put that up there on the screen, please. Senator Coons says that the Congress and the White House should come to a common position about when we are willing to go to the next step and to send not just arms, but troops to the aid in defense of Ukraine. If the answer is never, then we are inviting another level of escalation in brutality by Putin. Once again, there is no consideration of, okay, what then? What's going to happen? What happens, ask yourself this question, if a United States soldier or service member steps or gets killed by a Russian cluster munition? It's not like they are, not going weapons free in this war zone. Ask yourself what's going to happen in that situation, because it's going to invite a response by us. I mean, look, if one of our soldiers or if a myriad of our soldiers gets killed by Russia, it's game over. I mean, in terms of how exactly that situation is going to escalate, this is incredibly dangerous. It is also why I was against all of these troops that were on the ground in Syria. I was deeply afraid of exactly this scenario, which is we have 100, 200 guys. They're sitting there, with our, whatever the troops or whatever we were working with against ISIS. And then a Russian plane goes over, some guy, he doesn't even know what's happening. He goes hot on the wrong target. Now you're in a whole other geopolitical ballgame.
Right.
And the Trump administration pursued that policy. The Obama administration pursued that policy. And now they are pushing for that, not just in Syria, where I guess it's arguable over, in terms of how much we're influencing the conflict, et cetera. And it's not like Syria is a nuclear power. Now we are talking about in Ukraine, in a war which Russia itself is actively involved in. I just think that the lack of consideration on this is just completely crazy. And people are really not realizing just how quickly these things can escalate. I feel like I'm almost a broken record at this
I
point.
know,
Like,
but
how many times you
can't
say the same
enough.
warning?
Well, and it also tracks with what we talked about yesterday, which was President Biden once again escalating his rhetoric and calling what's happening in Ukraine genocide.
Yes.
So, of course, I mean, you're going to have a lot of Americans who listen to Senator Coons' comments and basically agree with him because of the sort of rhetorical landscape that has been laid out before them. I mean, it follows logically if you say Putin is a war criminal, he should be tried at The Hague, and this is genocide, then what Chris Coons is saying no longer becomes so crazy. This becomes the next logical step, especially when they use such sanitized language constantly in the press and our political class about what this would actually look like. They always frame it in the context of we have to defend Ukraine. Yes, virtually everyone sees the Ukrainian cause as incredibly just. They never really lay out for you what happens, though, if we end up with troops on the ground, if we end up with a direct conflict with Russia, and how much pain that is going to bring to everyone, including the Ukrainians, by the way. But the type of conflagration that could lead to around the globe is absolutely horror to contemplate.
I'm glad you put it that way, because people don't realize that, okay, let's say that there is an actual war between the US and Russia, or even a limited war in which Ukraine is the battlefield. Ukraine is gone. It gets wiped out.
Yes.
There was an active acknowledgement during the Cold War that all the troops who were stationed in West Berlin, their job was to die. That was it. They knew it too, actually. A lot of the tank commanders and others. Their job was simply to be there in order to invite nuclear escalation or a much bigger and broader land conflict. Do you want that to happen to the Ukrainian civilians? I mean, yeah, several million of them have fled. There are still, 20, 30, some odd million people who live in that country. Think about the elderly population, pensioners and others who can't move and who have lived in these places their entire lives. It's over for them. I mean, they will die very quickly, and especially from the after effects of war. So the broader goal here has to be tamping down this type of rhetoric, trying to bring this conflict to an end in any way possible that we can to guarantee peace for them. And look, I don't want to have sympathy. I don't have sympathy for Vladimir Putin, but I was telling you yesterday, I saw some photos of Buddhist troops from Eastern Siberia conscripts deployed to fight in Ukraine. These guys don't have anything to do with what's going on in Ukraine, and they're getting killed indiscriminately. I'm not saying that if I was Ukrainian and I wouldn't shoot at them too. I'm saying, do you think they really had a choice in being there? And they suffer under the Russian regime, just like many of the other ethnic minorities who live there, used as pawns, thrown into this conflict, probably specifically in order to make sure that the ethnic Russians don't realize the real costs and let these guys get killed. It's horrible.
There are Russian mothers who are starting to ask questions.
And they should.
Especially about the sailors who were likely killed when the Moskva, that flagship, battleship of the Russians, was sank by Ukrainian missiles. And they're saying, no, it was a fire and munitions exploded, but everybody was fine and we got them all evacuated. Well, that was not the case. There were, we don't know how many, but it certainly appears that there were scores of Russians who were killed on that ship. And so their family members and their mothers in particular are saying, where is my son? What happened? We want answers. So there's a lot of pain here all the way around. And there's another escalation that we wanted to bring to you as well, which is for the first time, let's put this next piece up on the screen. You have British Special Forces training local troops in Ukraine, serving UK soldiers on the ground for the first time. So again, this is a tremendous escalation. It is a dangerous game that they are playing here, because if you end up with a direct conflict between Russia and between the UK, that again could lead to a direct conflict.
This is a NATO country. This is not a joke. This is the second most powerful country in all of NATO. And also they have nukes. I think people should realize that. You know, the French and the Brits also have nuclear weapons in their own right. And the UK, I mean, they're a joke compared to us, but they're still great power and a great military. So, you look at this and we see a very clear situation where things can go awry. Now look, maybe it'll work out, but one of the lessons of the last 25 years of American foreign policy is not Western foreign policy really, is we act with hubris and we don't consider what the 40th order consequences may be. Ask the people of Libya how it worked out for them. Ask the people of Syria how it worked out for them. Ask the people of Mosul and people in Iraq who were killed in an ethnic sectarian conflict. Ask the people of Afghanistan and the ethnic minorities and others who had frankly false hope and then got killed by the Taliban. All of this, it's not the direct fault of the United States, but we had a role. And we should try to minimize that role to the best of our ability in order to make sure that people don't die.
And the big picture is this administration at this point has made it really clear that they actually are not pushing for peace. What they are pushing for is a foolish plan of regime change. I mean, that's their end goal. They've said it outright. Ron Klain saying, we don't want an off-ramp for Putin. That tells you they are not actually interested in peace. They are not actually interested in using the great might and pressure and influence and sway of the United States to try to bring this conflict to a close. And that is extraordinarily dangerous.
Absolutely right.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.